Welcome back to Bloomberg's special coverage of the 2024 CNN presidential debate right here on Bloomberg Television and Radio alongside Joe Matthew. I'm Kaylee Lyons, and we just witnessed 90 minutes of debate between a current and former president for the first time in history, a debate in which the incumbent Joe Biden often struggled, stumbling over his words, misstating figures at times, freezing at one point, whereas Donald Trump, who did appear this evening, Joe, much more energetic and forceful, often said things that were not factually correct. Joe Biden continually accused him of lying, and yet with a hoarse voice that many in the Democratic Party are now attributing to a cold, Joe Biden at 81 perhaps played into fears about his age this evening.
Yeah, this is an interesting exercise. We're probably going to hear a lot more about performance than we are about substance following 90 minutes. To Kaylee's point there, we had one break in the middle of this exercise, one toward the end before closing statements. The president actually seemed to struggle through his closing statement even, which is an opportunity to get into something that would be more rehearsed. But look, the CNN moderators who we just watched and listened to did not make any attempt to fact-check either of the candidates here. And I guess that will be the job of our panel, Kaylee.
Yeah, of course, Joe Biden did at times attempt to fact-check Trump, at least accusing him of lying, not always, though, providing what he says are actually the facts. And many times, interestingly, these candidates were asked questions that they simply just did not answer, talking about other subjects entirely. Donald Trump did that on multiple occasions when asked if he would accept the results of the election. It took multiple tries from the moderator, and he said ultimately not yes or no, but if it's a fair and legal election, absolutely. We're
going to walk you through some of the highlights, if we can call them that, of this first debate in the cycle, and we'll have analysis ahead with Rick Davis and Kristen Hahn.
First, though, let's check in on the spin room in Atlanta with Bloomberg's correspondent David Gura, who is there on the ground. So, David, that was something to behold. At times, frankly, it was uncomfortable. How do things feel in the spin room in the aftermath?
Yeah, I think the two of you have laid that out just as I witnessed it. It was a really stark contrast, and there were moments that were, as you said, quite awkward. The contrast really stark between these two candidates in terms of their presentation. You know, I think that's something interesting. You mentioned that there wasn't any fact-checking. You did notice that with the former president, with Donald Trump, when asked a question, he would often take that moment to go back to something else that was talked about in the question before that. And I did note a few times that Dana Bash reintroduced the question, saying, no, this is what we're talking about now, and give him another opportunity to do that. But I agree with your assessment, too, that we didn't get a whole lot of substance here, or substance that was new. I think of sort of ways that President Trump in particular reframed things that were novel, particularly when it comes to January 6th. Yes, there is what we've heard from him before about those who participated in that insurrection, in that action on Capitol Hill, but then kind of using January 6th as this kind of pivot moment for the economy and all that he inherited then, and sort of what happened on January 6th to the economy and the country as a whole was a, shall we say, creative spin on what happened on that day. A bit of news also from the former president on abortion. Of course, that's been in the news so much over these last few weeks, and we had that Supreme Court decision this week on the heels of the reporting that Bloomberg did yesterday about the Supreme Court allowing abortions in emergency circumstances to happen in Idaho. You did have Donald Trump on the record today, again, saying that he defers to the states, but says that he is a candidate who's in favor of exceptions in a kind of Reaganite mold, as he put it. That's what stood out to me. I noted with Donald Trump in particular, there were 3 or 4 things he kept coming back to. That, of course, the migrant crisis as he sees it, quantity of people coming into this country, he blaming Joe Biden for that, and talking a bit about sort of what he inherited, what Joe Biden inherited was this great economy, this great country.
Let's talk about creative spin for a moment, David, because you're right in the middle of it here as you join us live from the spin room. This is great, giving us a little bit of a walk around. How are the two campaigns representing themselves? This is a pretty quiet spin room, if we can be honest, before the debate started. What are you seeing around you now?
Yeah, it is a bit quiet, and once it ended, there was an eerie quiet to the room as well. But you have Matt, our cameraman, focusing here on Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is speaking to reporters now. On the floor here now, filling up with more reporters and more surrogates. See if I can get my microphone a bit closer, and we can pick up anything that she's having to say here, Joe. If you just wait with her.
Looks like Elise Stefanik.
It's a clear contest, and it's a win overwhelmingly for President Trump.
Forgive me. Yes, I saw her from afar.
President Biden will still be the Democratic nominee by the time we get to November?
He is the Democratic nominee. He will be on the ballot, and we are going to defeat him this November and elect President Trump, the next president of the United States. And the American people see crystal clear Joe Biden's failed policies, whether it's the border crisis, Biden inflation, or his weak role as commander-in-chief leading to chaos and weakened national security. This was an absolute overwhelming knockout victory by President Trump against a failed, feckless, and weak Joe Biden.
Just step away here as she continues. Again, that's Elise Stefanik, the congressman from New York. And as I kind of walk around the floor to see who else is out here, she principally there, the only surrogate that I'm seeing on the floor right now. But just picking up there on what she's saying about the economy. Again, that was something I think that the former president returned to time and time again. And you saw, as you mentioned at the top, Joe Biden, the current president, trying to contextualize sort of the economy that he inherited when he was president. I found it kind of halting in the way that he was able to deal with that issue, too.
David, that was great. Thanks for the peek behind the curtain there. Bloomberg's David Gura with us in the spin room. These are the conversations that are going to lead to the coverage tomorrow, and you just got a nice peek at it right there as we now reassemble our political panel. Rick Davis, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, is with us, along with Democratic strategist Kristen Hahn, partner at Rock Solutions. All right, guys, we need some honest talk here about what we just saw. Both of your phones were blowing up through that whole debate, as you heard from your colleagues from both sides of the aisle. Kristen, all anyone's talking about is Joe Biden's voice tonight.
I think it was unfortunate that he had a cold and that the delivery may not have been what we wanted. But honestly, the thing that struck me the most was just, Trump might have been delivering, had a more booming voice, but I was trying to take notes of all the lies he was saying, and then my hands started hurting. So, it's really remarkable. He's taking credit for the insulin prices going down, again making claims that the election was a fraud, wildly wrong claims about women in healthcare. And it's funny because I'm like, if we're talking about, as your correspondent mentioned just a second ago, he made news saying he would be okay with exceptions for rape and incest and that type of thing. But we just saw the man lie for an hour and a half. Blatant lies, and we'll see all of that debunked in the next, if you don't already know, over the next several days. So why would we ever believe him? Why would any woman ever believe him? I certainly don't. I also thought it was interesting that he kept saying that, and it's a big point in his campaign, that he talks about how the president's, weaponizing the judicial system and coming after him. But he actually said, and I quote, he has no idea what these cases even are. So is it that he's too old and can't remember what the cases are, or is he weaponizing his judicial system? So there were so many, I don't know, I wasn't expecting anything different from President Trump, but despite the delivery, I think, there couldn't be two more, distinct choices. And that was true before tonight. It's still true now, and it'll be true tomorrow.
But despite all of these factual inaccuracies, Trump did indeed lie at times, and Joe Biden attempted to call him out on that. And yet at times, Joe Biden himself struggled to articulate what exactly the facts were, even his own facts, misstating the number of jobs, for example, created in his administration. At one point, calling into question his own policy on Medicare after freezing for a substantial period of time. Rick, I'm looking at the traffic on social media, other reports I'm seeing, and many are suggesting that the Democrats are going to have to put someone else forward as the nominee after tonight.
Yeah, when you think back about what we were trying to handicap this debate going into it, what was Trump going to need to do? Trump 2.0 needed to be more disciplined. He needed to be less aggressive. He needed to not talk over Biden. Those things he accomplished, right? He got hot toward the end of the debate, and I think it actually took something away from his performance. But at the end of the day, Trump kind of delivered on the style at which everyone set the expectation to. And the only thing anybody expected Joe Biden to do was convince us that his age is not a factor in being a candidate for president or potentially a president for another term. And he did not accomplish that task. You've mentioned it very clearly, his halting inability to finish his sentences. He looked very overprepared. He seemed to have a hard time getting the numbers out. And we have to remember, this was his idea to debate this early, one-on-one with Donald Trump, in this kind of a venue with no limits on fact-checking, right? And so Joe Biden's job was to be the fact checker, but instead he kind of just accepted any topic that Donald Trump wanted to talk about and responded to it as best he could, but not with necessarily a fact check that could say, hey, you're lying about this and this is what the real story is. It was more kind of a personal response. And that's the thing that I think most people are going to take away from this debate is this was a very intensely personal debate where there were two guys who clearly didn't like each other, who had a totally different version of America, and neither one of them really delivered any kind of a good outcome for themselves. But the performance by Joe Biden has to create questions in the Democratic Party's minds as to whether or not they have someone who's up to the election. They've got 5 months to go, and this was not a man who I would say you'd ever want to put on a debate stage again.
Let's give a taste here as part of our special coverage of the CNN presidential debate, a moment here for Joe Biden talking to Donald Trump about morals.
The crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
An alley cat, Kristen. I'm not sure how many 20-somethings have ever heard that word used in that way. When you listen to him speaking so quickly like that, sometimes not able to get all the words out, coupled by the voice that was struggling with a cold, freezing up at times, a halting performance, as we heard from a couple of folks. Democrats are going to be upset about this, worried about this tomorrow. How can you with a straight face tell people that he's going to be in good shape 4 years from now running this country?
I mean, I think also, in addition to that, he was trying to fit too many things into his answers, right? I mean, Trump is really good at taking one idea and running with it. Whether that's true or not, usually mostly false. But trying to fit too much, and if you're quiet and you don't have that booming voice, then it's hard for people to hear.
Well, there were a lot of questions about his travel schedule. He was in 3 different time zones over the last 2 weeks. Was that a fail on his staff's part?
He's the president of the United States. I wouldn't presume to know exactly where and when he needs to be where he needs to be. But he'll have some work to do after this.
Of course, as we consider what this debate ultimately was about, we're here analyzing the performance of both of those candidates, but they did at times talk about policy. Joe Biden decided to close out his remarks talking about economic policy, what he wants to do in taxes and to get inflation down. Donald Trump did at one point talk about tariffs, suggesting they're not going to drive prices higher. He said it just will force other countries to pay us a lot of money. Rick, for a voter sitting at home, do you think any of that realistically broke through, or was the performance aspect ultimately too distracting?
Yeah, I think it was very hard to get past the performance and also the hatred between the two individuals, right? I mean, that is a block to actually hearing anything positive coming out of their mouths. They talk to each other more than they talk to the American people. And that was a stark departure from Joe Biden 4 years ago, where he would take time to look directly into the camera and talk directly to the American people about issues he thought were important. So I think it was relatively void of any real policy prescriptions. I mean, even the closing statements didn't really punch through a specific policy idea. Joe Biden talked about, making the tax code simpler and fairer, but he didn't give any real details behind what that would look like. And Donald Trump, I mean, arguably he did what he does every single day on the campaign trail. When he goes to his big events, he just makes things up. And he talks about how great they are. And I'm sure his campaign was cringing when he got into, a contest of wills over who's got the better golf game and how many country club championships he just
that was a moment.
Just won. And so I don't think either one of them distinguished themselves particularly well. I mean, the idea that we're even talking about Donald Trump winning a debate is because it was such a disastrous performance by Joe Biden. And so if you were an independent voter, a swing voter from one of the key states looking into this debate saying, who's got something that I can latch onto that I'm going to be, excited about voting for, I don't think either one of them were able to accomplish that goal. And if anything, I wouldn't be surprised that the double haters get bigger, not smaller, as a result of this debate.
Now, that's saying something. It plays poorly for both candidates, in your opinion. By the way, our Atlanta bureau chief in the room says no Democratic surrogates on the spin room floor right now. Kristen, how long is it going to take the party to come up with an answer to this?
I mean, I think they're going to have to come up with how they're going to talk about it immediately. And I think that the campaign's ready to do that. And I think if you're going to look at, the president is right on the issues. He was up against a liar. The performance wasn't what it needed to be. Mm-hmm. The campaign's going to have to be in full mode, out there talking to people about what makes this president different, why these issues are so important to the American people. And it's not an easy thing to do when you have somebody that you're up against just lying.
Yeah.
As we are in our final minute here, I would just point out that we are now 2 weeks out from Donald Trump's sentencing in New York when he was convicted of 34 felony crimes. And we are just days out from getting a decision from the Supreme Court on whether he has presidential immunity in another case with which he has been charged and in regard to January 6th. So there could still be much to develop in this race, and yet it feels like, Joe, that something did shift in this race this evening.
It did. We'll see how things feel tomorrow, and of course we'll be back to hash out the details on the day after. Our thanks to Rick Davis, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, and Democratic strategist Kristen Hahn, partner at Rock Solutions. A perfect panel with some smart insights tonight, Kaylee. We'll have a lot to learn tomorrow as the campaigns get on the road. Donald Trump's going to Virginia, Joe Biden to North Carolina, and it continues. We'll have another debate in September, assuming that takes place. That concludes our special coverage of the first 2024 presidential debate.
Thanks for joining us on Bloomberg TV and radio.